We've been monitoring the virus outbreak in China very closely and taking proactive measures in response to the latest advice from experts. I've said that repeatedly, that we are constantly updating and recalibrating our measures. On Tuesday, we announced travel restrictions on Hubei travelers, and since then, the number of reported infections in China has doubled to over 9,000. The virus has spread to every region of mainland China. The majority of these confirmed cases are still linked back to Hubei province. That's what we said the last time. It remains so. The majority are linked back to Hubei. But there is, according to the medical experts who are assessing the situation, there is a growing possibility that more individuals from other parts of China may be infected with the virus. This means that there is a high likelihood of widespread community transmission in other parts of China. And we are likely to see a sharper rise in the spread of the virus in Chinese cities beyond Hubei in the coming days. This is the latest assessment from the team. So the task force has decided to take additional measures now to restrict travel. Specifically, we will expand our travel restrictions to all new travelers arriving from mainland China. So all new visitors with recent travel history to mainland China within the last 14 days will not be allowed to enter into Singapore or to transit through Singapore. We will suspend the issuance of all forms of new visas to those holding PRC passports. Previously issued short-term and multi-visit visas and visa-free transit facilities will be suspended until further notice. And during this period of suspension, PRC passport holders holding such visas will not be allowed to enter Singapore as well. Returning Singaporeans, permanent residents and residents with long-term passes who have traveled to mainland China will be allowed to enter Singapore. But we will issue an advisory for them to be placed on 14 days leave of absence as a preventive measure, and they will be issued a health advisory to avoid social contact. So this additional travel restriction, on top of all that we have already introduced over the past few days, will enable us to limit the number of new imported cases here and to reduce the risk of community spread in Singapore. As we have said repeatedly, the evidence so far is that there is no community spread of the virus within Singapore. So we are doing everything we can to reduce the risk of community spread and to limit the number of new imported cases here, especially now given the latest assessment of the situation in China. The situation remains fluid, it is constantly changing, and we do not rule out taking further measures. As I've said before, we are monitoring and we will do constant updates and recalibration of all the actions we take. But what is clear is that the Wuhan virus is already having an impact on the economy, and we have to be prepared for this to go on for some time. So the government is now looking at how we can support businesses and, more importantly, Singaporean workers who are impacted. And DPM Heng Swee Kiat will share more about a package of measures to assist Singaporeans tomorrow. So he will share more tomorrow on what we can do to assist Singaporeans impacted by this Wuhan virus. It has been 1 week since the task force was formed, and across the whole of government, public officials have been mobilized. They are working very hard to respond to this very challenging situation. You can see our healthcare workers at the front line, our medical teams at the airport, ICA officers at the checkpoint, SAF personnel and PA staff doing the mask packing and distribution, our officials getting the quarantine facilities ready, a whole range of work. The whole of government has been galvanized and mobilized towards tackling the current situation. And the private sector too is stepping up. Private organizations and businesses are taking precautions. This afternoon I was at the Radars lunch. I asked all the businesses and they all are already taking steps. Temperature taking for events that they organize and activities that they hold. They are making sure that any of the employee who's recently back from China stays at home, and then they work out some flexi work arrangements, and then they make sure that anyone who is sick sees a doctor and then stays at home too instead of staying on in the office. So private sector organizations are doing their part. In fact, you saw recently Scoot pilots and crew who volunteered to fly to Wuhan to bring our Singaporeans home. So this is the Singaporean spirit, this is the Singapore spirit at work. Government, private sector, people sector, all working together. And I believe that's the spirit that will enable us to get through this together.